我第一次见到大海是在夜晚，周围都是黑的，黑暗才是世界本身，而太阳只是一场意外的大火。
I like the sort of the darkness as a motive. Excuse me, the black backdrop, talking off character, the talking off screen. I mean, the hand signals later on during that very fraught scene based around the gender identity. I think there's just a lot of great themes about how difficult it is to be yourself, depending on how you want to express your gender or your sexuality, especially depending on the culture you're growing up in. I thought the piece had a really sort of raw and human, compassionate approach that I thought really made the piece have an emotional heart that worked quite well and created very striking images and very striking sort of thoughts about sort of life and death and who you are as a person and how and what you're forced to do to be yourself and how a sort of a poor environment can really lead you to a bad road. So I thought the piece was well done. I had a good sense of style given the motive of darkness and pain and trauma, obviously, and I thought it was very effective in reflecting sort of both an internal turmoil and a sort of external societal turmoil that comes from a lot of people that deal with this. So I thought it was a strong piece overall.
I think it was a really creative way to discuss these individual stories and discussing the gender binary and being gender fluid, gender non-binary, and doing it without like any conceived image, to where the audience could look at this individual and make up their mind or like place them in a category. Because I know for those who are non-binary, a lot of times they'll be seen and they'll be referred to as a gender that they don't necessarily identify with. And by telling the story the way you did, you took that out of the equation to where it's truly focusing just on their stories. And I think that was a really creative way to do that. And I think it served a real purpose here. It was a really creative way to do that. A really interesting story that unfolded in a really interesting style.
We see hands at one point doing shadow puppets on the wall, but we don't actually ever see anyone. You can just hear the panic, manic voice. And as people are communicating with each other, I found that a very interesting choice where they put a score and a dialogue over still images to tell the story, or images of people of hands playing a shadow with shadows on the wall. I found that a very interesting way to convey the story and what was going on, where the actors had to rely on their voice only instead of movement and gestures. It was all in their voice. I found that a very interesting format to make a film in, because it makes you really focus on what people are saying rather than everything else going on in the scene.
A really interesting way of visually telling two characters' stories using dialogue and visuals that did not even have the characters in them. And the images chosen were really interesting and compelling visually, and it made up for the non-traditional approach to telling a character's story through the visuals, which I thought was really creative.
This is an interesting premise, exploring non-binary struggles with reclaiming respect and equality in the world. The concept of closing your eyes and seeing red, what they say it means, it's very cryptic, very deep as well. Angels with one wing. That scene with the moon in the ocean that they use a couple of times, it's just visually beautiful. It's combined with the off voice, and then we go to this very intense, dramatic, violent sounds. You have this altercation, but you see something very nice with hands, shadow figures with hands. It's just, they are dealing with rejection, anger, suicidal thoughts, but they make a good contrast that brings some calmness to the whole piece. I loved the music, and at the end, and I felt that at least they felt solace from talking to the sister.
This was an interesting film. I liked that it was pretty much voiceover with it really great visuals to go along with it. And of course, the different, what do you call it? I don't know if it's called chapters or different subjects that were brought up, such as animal, and just letting us know a little bit more visually what this journey was. I liked the shadows on the wall with the child. I felt like the child was trying to cope with the chaos that was happening in the home environment. Yeah, I feel like this is about identity and trying to figure out someone's place in the person's place in the world, as far as identity goes, and not feeling alone or feeling like hopeless, feeling different. I think it's, subject to interpretation to some degree as well, but I thought this was really interesting, and I think it gets you thinking.
Pain, frustration, and anger that comes with gender identity. It does a good job of conveying that struggle for informing the general population when it comes to that third gender. Those who don't feel like they have a gender. It's very interesting because specifically that middle portion with that it felt like a mental break, just that boiling point where everything kind of flowed over. Specifically that rant where I believe the brother went on about how no matter where you go, they look at you and they judge you. That specifically that silent judging, that factor of they're not outright saying it, but they're thinking something. I think that's something that has to be addressed. That more passive discrimination, where you could be talking to someone and they'll just passively drop something about, that they're judging you. And that's definitely something that is going to take a lot of time and work to work around, because when it's passive, it's less noticeable unless you're actually paying attention. Because I think the biggest thing is it comes from a place of ignorance and a lack of understanding.